All right, I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order. To pass it over to our solicitor, Chad DeFelice.
Everybody hear me? There are a few housekeeping matters before we actually get started with the applicant's presentation. And just so everybody's aware of kind of the procedure that we're going to follow here, we're going to deal with these housekeeping matters. There was a motion for Mr. Manzi to recuse himself that was filed by Attorney Spadoni. We're going to deal with that first. There also is, there may be multiple requests for party status, and then, I'm sorry. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get into the applicant's presentation. There's going to be cross-examination back and forth with the witnesses, and then I believe Mr. Blasey, that's probably what we'll get through tonight. We're going to go maybe till 10:30 now. And then we're going to save public comment for the end, because the majority of the time, a lot of the questions that the public would have may be answered by either the applicant or by any objectors. So we're going to wait for that for the end. We're going to see how far we get tonight, and then we'll come back. Next meeting, I would assume it's going to be April, or March, I'm sorry. And we'll finish up then. If we can't finish up then, we'll keep continuing until we do. Okay? Just so everybody understands kind of the procedure here. Okay? So, well, Tina, if you could just at least read the refusal, just so everybody, oh, I'm sorry.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Appeal number 2023-01. The Zoning Hearing Board of Upper Mount Bethel Township will conduct a hearing on Tuesday, February 27, 2024 at 7 p.m. at the Upper Mount Bethel Township Firehouse located at 2341 North Delaware Drive, Mount Bethel, PA 18343, for the special exception use request, appeal of zoning officer determination, and zoning hearing board determination request of River Point Logistics Center, LLC, for the properties located at Potomac Street, Mount Bethel. The properties are identified as Northampton County Tax Parcel ID D11-5-1A-4-0131, also known as the former Angle property, located in the R1 Residential Zoning District, and Northampton County Tax Parcel ID C11-31-1-0131, also known as the Potomac property, located in the R1 Residential Zoning District and the I2 General Industrial Zoning District. The applicant is proposing a sewage disposal field for both properties in connection with the development of the planned industrial park. The applicant seeks special exception approvals for sewage disposal fields to be located on both properties, appropriate public uses and essential services, use class 13, are listed in section 4.102 as permitted by special exception use in the R1 zoning district pursuant to section 4.202. The applicant also appeals the determination of the zoning officer. Disposal fields are part of sewage treatment facilities.
Okay, so just so everybody understands, on this motion to recuse, it is ultimately up to the board member to determine whether or not that they believe that they can, evaluate this case without bias. But there are some arguments that there would be a conflict of interest, but ultimately the decision is up to the board member. I'm going to ask some questions of Mr. Manzi. I'm going to give Mr. Spadoni an opportunity to ask any questions, Mr. Kaplan, and any of the other attorneys here, if there's any questions that they'd like to follow up with. I'm going to give an opportunity to do that. But Mr. Manzi, the allegation is that you have a conflict of interest because you sold a piece of property to the applicant at some point in time. Can you identify what property you had sold?
It was a property along the river, in Slayford, that my brother and I sold.
Okay, and would that be 241 Decker Ferry Road?
Correct.
Okay. And when did you sell that property?
What's that?
When did you sell that property? If the deed indicates March 13th, 2020, would that be accurate?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
that's pretty-
who did you sell that property to?
I sold that to, a group, out of Lou Pector's office.
Okay, would that be Black Dog Development Partners, Inc.?
Yes, I
Okay.
think that's it.
And you had indicated that you and your brother owned it at the time?
Correct.
And what's your brother's name?
Lynn,
Lindsay Manzai?
yep.
Okay. And can you describe what that property was? Just
What's that?
Describe the type of property it was?
The type?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a cabin on the river.
Okay, and approximately how many acres was it, if you know?
Maybe like, 1.2, 1.3 acres.
Okay. At the time, did you have any idea what Mr. Pector may have wanted to do with the property?
What's that again?
Did you have any idea what Mr. Pector intended to do with the property when it was sold?
No.
Okay. Just had a question, I guess, my train of thought. At the time it sold, did you have any relationship with Mr. Pector?
No.
Okay, were you in business with Mr. Pector at all?
Was I what?
Were you in business with Mr. Pector?
No.
At the time, did you get an appraisal of the property?
Yes, we got an appraisal done on the property to see what it was worth.
Okay, and the deed ultimately indicates that the sale price was $260,000. Is that accurate?
I think that's correct, yes.
Okay, and do you recall what the appraised value of it was?
I think it was maybe just slightly over that.
Okay.
Maybe $500, $600, I don't know.
Okay. Currently, do you have any relationship with Mr. Pector, business relationship with Mr. Pector?
No,
Okay. Do you have any business relationship with Black Dog Development Partners?
no,
Do you have any business relationship with River Point Logistics Center LLC?
no,
Do you have any pecuniary interest, meaning monetary interest, in the outcome of this hearing?
absolutely not.
All right, so for example, you weren't promised any sort of additional payment if this got approved or anything like that?
No.
Okay. What is your relationship with Bangor Area Commercial Industrial Development Authority?
I'm the chairman of that organization.
Okay, and what is that organization?
The organization is to bring in companies, jobs, revenue for our township and our school district.
Okay, and does the Bangor Area Commercial Industrial and Development Authority, is that solely, is that organization solely do work for the township, or does it do work for other municipalities in the area?
The IDA, there's board members, one board member from each municipality on that board.
And what municipalities are involved in that
Well,
organization?
from Upper Mount Bethel, then there's a representative on there, of course, from Portland, East Bangor, and we, as a group, vote on different things when they come up to help the school district.
Okay. Have there been any negotiation, have you been involved in any negotiations or anything like that with either River Point Logistics Center LLC or Black Dog Development Partners, Inc., in your capacity as chairman of that authority?
No, the only thing that we did was in regards to the power plant property, we purchased that to be able to bring in some jobs and again revenue and clean it up.
When you say we, you're talking about the authority purchased it?
Correct. Yeah.
Those are all the questions I have for Mr. Manzai. Chris, do you have any questions for him?
Well, first off, I'd like to object to the way this is being handled. I do not want to have an inquisition of Mr. Manzi. I know him a long time. I'd like to make a presentation to the board, and I've submitted a motion and a brief,
Understood.
if I may.
Yep.
Well, if gentleman is not going to ask any questions, then I have at least one more question that should be answered before you start to hear oral argument.
Okay. I'm okay with that if Mr. Kaplan wants to ask any questions of the witness.
Mr. Manzi, the Bangor Area Industrial Development Authority is a non-profit corporation, is it not?
Yes, correct.
And it's created by the state of Pennsylvania to help economic development, doesn't it? Or doesn't it?
It does. I mean, that's what our goal is.
And the purchase of the power plant property by the IDA, isn't it true that the IDA received all of the funds to purchase that from River Point Logistics East or RPL East?
Yes, that's correct.
And wasn't the purpose of Bangor, the IDA taking title so that federal funds could be obtained to help clean up the power plant?
That's correct.
And didn't the IDA enter into a detailed development agreement with RPL East?
Yes,
And doesn't that agreement provide that RPL East pays all of the costs of maintenance of the power plant and all of the costs to clean up the power plant?
absolutely.
And when it's all cleaned up, isn't it true that the IDA is then required to convey the power plant to RPL East?
Correct.
And isn't it true that in that entire transaction, the IDA is simply acting as a holder of the title and really does not have any actual ownership interest in the power plant?
Yes, that is correct.
I have no further questions.
If I may, the board pleases. On March 22nd of 2023,
Chris, if you can just identify who you represent, just, sorry.
I represent a number of concerned citizens. I've entered my appearance on the record with Ms. Sarah Foss, the zoning officer. They are Michael and Regina Odefrank, Sharon Duffield, Donna De Palma, Raymond Hanson, and Joseph Batista.
Thank you.
In March of 2023, I filed a motion to recuse 2 members. One has been rendered moot as Mr. Engel is no longer on the board. Enough said about that because that's been resolved. We are now talking about Mr. Manzi, and I believe that Mr. Kaplan just made the best argument that I could give you. Number one, we've heard about the conveyance to a subsidiary or an affiliate or some entity with Mr. Pector, who is the applicant tonight, of Black Dog Development for $260,000. That in and of itself presents a problem. You may overlook that because it was done in 2020. However, there's a connection there and a nexus that you need to look at, and I think Mr. Manzi needs to look at. More importantly, Mr. Kaplan brought out all of the arguments that I would offer to you. Mr. Manzi is the chairman of the Bangor Area Commercial and Industrial Development Authority. They have had negotiations, not only as Mr. Kaplan has put forward, but they've had negotiations with the Upper Mount Bethel Township authorities, the Upper Mount Bethel Township Municipal Authority, which has just been formed.
Objection. If Mr. Spadoni is going to testify, then he's going to have to be sworn.
Sir, this is a proceeding, quasi-judicial proceeding of the Northampton County Courts. I would ask not to be interrupted, and I will not interrupt you.
Now, I'm going to interrupt you if you're going to get up there and you're going to testify and you're going to make statements about facts and you're not going to prove them. You're not going to do that unless Chad lets you do it. But I'm going to object to you putting evidence on the record and not be able to be cross-examined.
To the extent that you're arguing about what other entities may have done that we haven't established, at least on the record yet,
Mr. Kaplan said it.
I think you were talking about some other, other authorities, or other.
He indicated that they were in communication with the Industrial Development Authority, with River Point Logistics Center, and RPL East, which are before you this evening.
Right, but then you brought up the sewer authority.
Yeah.
Correct? Well, then take that out of the equation.
Okay. I will sustain it, at least to the extent that you're testifying about
So that
something
when
that
you
the sewer
have
authority would.
those connections and those concerns, and I'm asking you to look at the sites that I've given you tonight, I would reference Horn versus Township of Hilltown at 337 Atlantic 2nd, 858. I can't pronounce this because it's a word that I don't know. It looks like Cowahoughton versus the County of Allegheny, 901 A 2nd, 1003, and Gardner versus Rapowski at 252 A 2nd, 704. I usually don't speak in these terms, but I think you have a decision to make to advise the board in the following respect. If Mr. Manzi does not recuse himself, and this hearing goes forward, there may be a viable appeal that he, quote, polluted the entire well for this entire proceeding. It's my understanding that you have an alternate available. I don't know if that's true, but maybe Mr. DeFelice can tell you in that regard. But
There is an alternate available, but I mean, like we had discussed, I mean, it's my position, at least according to the rule, that the alternate would not be someone that would take part in the vote unless there was not a quorum, which, I mean, we have, even if he did recuse himself, we would still have a quorum.
If that's your ruling, that may open the entire proceeding up to concern. What I'm suggesting to you is that with Mr. Manzi on the board, you may have given the objectors a path to have this entire proceeding reviewed in Northampton County. This zoning hearing board is a quasi-judicial body of Northampton County. Everyone, including Mr. Kaplan and the objectors, are entitled to unfettered due process, and that means neutrality. And if someone could say that that's not neutrality, I would tend to argue with you, but I understand that may be his position. But you should be very, very, very careful in this regard. Thank you.
Mr. Manzi, I do have one follow-up question for you. Do you receive any sort of pecuniary interest from the redevelopment authority, or the IDA?
Any what?
Do you receive any monetary interest from the IDA?
Nothing. In fact, I don't take anything for any meeting that I've ever been on the zoning board. I don't take anything at all. When I was a supervisor, I haven't taken a dime for anything I've done.
Okay.
So someone who's making accusations that I can't be fair, you know what? Maybe you better think a little bit.
Fair is-
I've been on this board for 15 years.
Fair is a word I don't use. It needs to be equitable.
All right. So, Mr. Manzi, just to clarify, you're a volunteer on that board, correct?
I'm a volunteer on every board. I don't take anything from anything.
Specifically the IDA, you're a volunteer on that?
Correct.
And I'm just so it's clear, I'm just going to read, it's 53 PS 10906B regarding an alternate member. It states the chairman of the board may designate alternate members of the board to replace any absent or disqualified member, and if by reason of disqualified member, and if by reason of absence or disqualification of a member, a quorum is not reached, the chairman of the board shall designate as many alternate members to sit on the board as may be needed to reach a quorum. So, that's that. Mr. Manzi, do you believe in this situation that you can judge this fairly?
I believe I can judge it fairly, as I have in any case the past 15 years.
And you would agree that if the applicant does not demonstrate that they have met their burden that they must meet, that you would apply the law and you would deny it if they did not meet that burden?
Absolutely.
I mean, Mr. Manzi, it's ultimately up to you. After that colloquy and discussion or argument from Mr. Attorney Spadoni, do you feel that you want to remain on the board or recuse yourself?
I absolutely do want to remain on the board.
Thank you very much.
I just want to make sure of one thing. We filed an answer to Mr. Spadoni's petition. I just want to make sure if you don't have a copy.
Yeah, and just to be clear, Attorney Spadoni, I'm going to mark, I believe this was the original one you filed in March.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna mark that as CC one, Concerned Citizens one. And then I'm gonna mark the document you gave me tonight as CC two.
Mr. Kaplan, do you have that?
Yeah, I sent it to you.
No, the one I gave it tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry, no.
No, I
I'm
didn't
sorry.
say so.
And then, Mr. Kaplan, I'll mark that as A1, applicant one.
Do you have a copy?
Uh,
You need it.
Mr. DeFelice, we pre-marked exhibits, so we may not want to make that.
okay, what, do you wanna make this something?
A20,
Okay, that's the last one, or you wanna mark this A20?
that would be A20.
All right, we'll mark this A20. A20 will be the response of Riverport Logistics to the motion for recusal of Mr. Manzi. That is CC2, that's the Concerned Citizens, I guess, supplemental brief. Okay. And now I think there are at least some requests for party status. Mr. Blasey? And Mr. Blasey, if you can just identify when you get a chance, when you get up there, just who your clients are, so it's clear.
My name is Douglas Blasey. I'm an attorney, excuse me, at Elliott Greenleaf in the Bluebell office down by Fort Washington, Plymouth Meeting area, Plymouth Meeting. My clients are Michael and Regina Onifrak and Sharon Duffield. And they wish party status in this matter as they are both an immediate neighbor to the drip irrigation, what is called the Angle drip irrigation field. And then Ms. Duffield is about a block and a half away from that same field.
Can you provide addresses just real quick for
Yes,
us? I'm
I
sorry.
can. The Onifraks live at 43 Summerfield Drive, Mount Bethel, which should be Upper Mount Bethel for the township, but it's the postal address is Mount Bethel, PA, 18343. And Miss Duffield lives at 554, so 554 Potomac Street, again, Mount Bethel Township, 18343. And I can bring them to the stand if you wish, but if there's no objection to their being granted party status, then it's fine.
No, they live close by. I have no objection.
Okay,
Thank you.
we're gonna grant the party status.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I just understand as a kind of a separate matter, there may be some citizens who also may wish party status but haven't selected council. So you may just ask to see. I have no idea whether they wish that, but I've heard that in passing. Thank you.
Okay. Not a problem. Is there anyone else seeking party status before we begin? Do you want to come up to the, sorry.
My name is Raymond Hanson. I live in Saylorsburg with Donna DePalma. Donna DePalma owns a piece of property immediately next to the field that we are requesting to do this drip thing on.
Do you have the address of the property?
Sharon, do you have the physical address? I don't remember the address. I didn't know I needed it tonight. Our address is 111 Valentine's Way in Saylorsburg. That's where we physically live. We purchased the property that was in discussion from Donna's mom and dad 20 plus years ago, 25 years ago, actually, I think, beyond that. And with the intent to build on the property at that time, and there's a problem with the township, which I'm sure the township board would remember. And Donna would like to be a party also because he's immediately next door to this property.
Okay, Donna, what was your last name again? I'm sorry? DePalma.
I have the parcel number for Donna's property.
Please.
Parcel ID number D, as in David, 115, A as in Apple, 70131. That's the parcel, and originally the Fontanella property. Donna's maiden name is Fontanella. And she has a piece of this property that was left with her from her family. We purchased from her mom and dad many years ago.
I have no objection.
Okay, no objection. Okay, she'll be granted party status.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Any other attorneys?
No, sorry. Want to come up?
My name is Josue Batista.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Josue Batista.
Can you spell that for us?
Josue. Batista, Batista. I live in 904 Potomac Street. And I would like also be represented in the party.
Okay. You want to be granted party status with Mr. Blasey?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
He lives on Potomac Street. Do you live close to the property, animal property?
My backyard, we have 5-foot long border with that same property.
I have no objection.
I had to call my wife to get the address. I'd like party status, and I do have an adjoining property at 1030 Potomac Street. Definitely adjoining. I'm not a mile away, I'm not 1,500 feet away, I'm not 300 feet away, I'm not on a landlocked piece of land.
Directly adjacent.
Directly, right.
Ron Angle, I'm sorry, your name.
Oh, is there anybody who doesn't know? No. Yeah, I don't know. Ron Angle.
Okay.
Little humor here. Seems awful tense in here tonight. Any objections of anybody?
No objection, Mr. Kaplan?
No.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Anyone else before we get started? Yeah.
Adrian Cousins from Brooklyn, New York, on behalf of
Yes, my name is Barrett Walcott. I live at 74 Summerfield Drive.
I'm sorry, again, 74.
Summerfield Drive. Yes, I'm not too far from the Engle property, maybe about a house down.
And it's Walcott, W-A-L-C-O-T-T?
C-O-T-T.
Okay. And it was Derek, right?
Derek, D-A.
D-A, okay. Roughly, if you can approximate, how far are you away from the applicant's property?
Say about 2 houses.
2 houses?
Yes,
Okay,
right there.
okay. No objection from Mr. Kaplan? No objection from anybody else? Okay, sir?
My name is Stevenson Bramble. I live at 41 Summerfield Drive. Mike, I'm Regina, the neighbor.
Can you spell your last name for us?
B-R-A-M-B-L-E.
And it was Stevenson?
Yes, with a P-H.
Okay. And your address was what again?
41 Summerfield Drive. I also have an artesian well, which never stops running water. It could be 5 degrees below zero, it still runs water.
Okay.
So.
Understood.
It's gonna affect me.
Okay. Any objection?
No.
Mr. Kaplan? No one else?
And it's also, the property's also in the trust, so.
You'll get an opportunity to talk about that when it's your chance. Sir?
My name is Jeff Joy, J-O-Y, 62 Summerfield Drive.
Okay. And if you could approximate, how far is your house from the applicant's property?
I am directly across from Onifrek's home on the opposite side of the street, right on the corner of Farmstead and Summerfield.
I have no objection.
I got you not on it, what was your name, Jeffrey Joy?
Joy, J-O-Y.
That's it. Anyone else?
Fred Clark, 19 Crystal Terrace, Upper Mount Bethel. I'm probably 100 feet from Sharon Duffield. I'm in the neighborhood.
I don't have an objection.
Okay. No objection, no objection. Okay, we'll grant your party status. Should have asked if there anybody that doesn't want to be designated party status. I should have asked that first, but yeah.
Michael Herrero, L-O-U-R-E-I-R-O.
Can you, one more time, I'm sorry.
L-O-U-R-E-I-R-O.
Okay.
1222 Potomac Street, directly adjoining property.
No objection?
No.
Okay. Objection. Okay, I'll be ready for party status.
Joan Gibbs, 30 Summerfield Drive. I'm about 7 houses away from the trip.
No objection. No objection. No objection.
Corey Ekman, 1108 Potomac Street, less than 500 feet away.
Mark, no objection?
No.
Okay. What was- No objection there. Okay. I see no one else. We're going to turn it over to the applicant to begin their presentation. And, I'm s-
Ask you to turn the speaker up so
Well, I think we're going to testify from over here, so I think it'll be okay.
Mr. DeFelice, just follow what you just did. I followed all the previous. This gentleman here is representing who?
Mr. Cousins represents the township supervisors.
Oh.
Board supervisors, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. That's okay.
I don't need mine.
Oh, yeah, you have one. So I want the record to reflect that we have handed out to all members of the zoning hearing board, to Mr. DeFelice and to Mr. Blasey and, I'm sorry. Cousins.
Yep.
Sorry. We have handed out a binder that has 19 exhibits in it. These are the exhibits that we intend to use in this presentation. We thought it would be easier if you had a loose leaf book, and when we go through this, we can just turn pages instead of handing papers out. So, with that, let me. I got one here. What? Yeah, where's for the witness? No, this is my only one. We're gonna have to get one of them back. Please.
Can we maybe share? And just so the record is clear, can we just have a roll call of who's here, at least from the board members? I probably should have done that at first, just so the record's clear.
Russ Horn, Chairman, President.
Dr. Scott Doty.
Lee McDonald.
Jeff Manzi here.
Tony Rago.
Okay, and alternate.
Michael Kulik, alternate.
Thank you.
Members of the board, my name is Mark Kaplan. I represent River Point Logistics Center, LLC.
Hold the mic down. Mark, hold the mic down.
Is that better off over there?
That other mic is louder at the table.
Yeah, I think it's louder at the table. Thank you. So River Point Logistics has filed an application for a special exception to install a drip irrigation or drip disposal facility in the former Engel property. I think that it's very important, in my opening, that we get a clear understanding of what a special exception is and what the requirements are for a special exception. And I apologize if I sound like I'm preaching or I'm pedantic, but it's clear to me from all of the discussions we've had over the past months that there's a big misunderstanding as to what a special exception is and what the rules of special exception are. So a special exception is a form of permitted use. It is not an exception to the ordinance. It's not a variance. Rather, if an applicant demonstrates that the proposed use meets the objective requirements of the zoning ordinance related to that use, then the use is to be permitted, and the applicant is entitled to the special exception. I would like to make clear that the special exception process only relates to the use of the land and does not involve the specific engineering or design aspects of the proposed development. Now, in my binder, at, I believe it's 18, item number 18, you want me to wait?
I'm just gonna go to the bathroom.
Let's take 5 minutes, just, I
I'll
don't.
join him, that
Okay.
would be fine, thank you.
We do have an individual live streaming, and if, sir, if you could just state your name just so we have it for the record.
Chris Calley,
Chris Calley,
C-A-L-L-I-E.
C-A-L-L-I. Okay, thank you.
So let me start that little presentation over again. A special exception is a form of permitted use. It's not an exception to the ordinance, and it's not a variance. Rather, if an applicant demonstrates that the proposed use meets the, and this is an important word, objective requirements of the ordinance related to that use, then the use is to be permitted, and the applicant is entitled to that special exception. And as I said before, a special exception only has to do with the use of the property, not how it's configured, not how it works. It's just the use. Now, an applicant for a special exception has the duty of presenting evidence and the burden of persuading the board that his use satisfies, and I'll use that word again, objective or specific requirements of the zoning ordinance in order to obtain the special exception. That's our burden of proof. Once the applicant meets its burden of proof and demonstrates that we comply with whatever objective requirements there are, a presumption arises that the proposed use is consistent with the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. In fact, the cases have repeatedly said that when the governing body, the supervisors or whoever, designate a particular use as a special exception use, they have made a legislative determination that under normal circumstances, that use is consistent with health, safety, and welfare. Now, I go on. Where there are no objective requirements for the requested special exception with the in the ordinance, it must be presumed that the proposed use is consistent with the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. I've been all through this ordinance. This use is permitted by special exception. I do not believe that there are any objective requirements in the ordinance, except maybe that there has to be enough parking spaces, and maybe that the use has to be properly landscaped. But there are no other objective requirements in the ordinance. Therefore, once we have demonstrated that, and I believe we demonstrated it by filing the application, the burden then shifts to the objectors to the application to present evidence and to persuade the board that the proposed use will have a generally detrimental effect on the health, safety, and welfare to a greater extent than the normal of such use, and that there is a demonstrated danger. Objectors have the initial evidence presentation duty with respect to the general matters of, does it comply with the comp plan? Does it have any effect on the neighborhood values, etc.? They have the initial presentation duty with respect to general matters regarding alleged detriment to health, safety, and welfare. And the ordinance may not shift that burden to the applicant. The cases have repeatedly said that the burden of proof placed on an objector is a very heavy one. The evidence presented by the objector must show, and these are the words out of the cases, to a high degree of probability that the use will generate adverse impacts not normally generated by this type of use, and that these impacts will pose a substantial threat to the health and safety of the community. Objectors must demonstrate much more than unsubstantiated concerns, vague generalities, and mere speculation as to possible harm. I'm going to present 3 witnesses tonight. Fred Ebert, professional engineer, our sewer engineer. Joe Valentine, our soil scientist, and Jeff Clark, our hydrogeologist. Before I bring Fred up here, I think there's a couple more things that I might want to add to the record, and they're all in my book. So in the book, Chad, A1 is the deed to the property. A2 is the zoning officer's original November 4th, 2022 zoning determination, where she determined that the use that we propose fits within the special exception category and that we had to make an application. That letter also said that the 500-foot rule applies. So that's A2. A4 is the revised zoning determination that eliminated our need to challenge the decision that we needed a variance because we were within 500 feet. So the only application before the board is with regard to the special exception. As a matter of convenience, I've included as A3 our full application. A5 is a resolution of the Upper Mount Bethel Township Municipal Authority authorizing us to make an application on the authority's behalf for the special exception, as the authority will be the owner of the entire treatment plant. I think that's it for the ones I want to introduce. So with that, let me bring Fred Ebert up. Fred, I take that back. There's one more thing that I want to do.
And Mark, just to clarify, A5 is the resolution dated February 26, 2024.
It is. I want to do one more thing. So I have a copy, about 4 pages, out of the zoning ordinance, and I'd like to hand it out, just walk you through that quickly.
We okay marking that A21?
Yeah, please.
A20 is the applicant's response to the motion to recuse Mr. Manzi.
So the first page is Schedule 1 of the zoning ordinance, and this is the chart that shows what kind of uses are permitted in which district. And if you go down to number 13 on the left, it's appropriate public uses and essential services. And if you go over to the residential category that they are permitted. They're permitted by special exception. Now, the next thing that I copied out of the ordinance was the operative provision of section 4.202, where it defines special exception uses. And you can read this yourself, but in the last paragraph, this is the only paragraph that has anything close to an objective requirement. A special exception use shall not cause substantial injury to the value of other property where it is to be located, shall conform with regulations applicable to the district where located, shall be compatible with adjoining development. And then we get to shall provide adequate landscaping and screening to protect adjoining areas. That is somewhat specific. And shall provide off-street parking and loading so as to minimize interference with traffic on the local streets. And we will demonstrate both of those. And then the last one is also from the zoning ordinance. It's use class 13, and it talks about appropriate public uses and essential services. And my point in all of this, in introducing this to you, is to demonstrate that the ordinance allows this use as a special exception and has almost zero specific requirements. The most I could glean from it is that we gotta have parking and maybe we gotta have landscaping. The rest of the requirements of this ordinance are what the case is called general requirements. And I won't belabor it, but I've already told you what the burden of proof is on the objectors. So with that introduction, I'd like to bring Mr. Ebert up and have him sit. I do. Please state your name and business address for the record.
My name is Frederick Ebert, E-B-E-R-T. It's Ebert Engineering, 4397 Skipback Pike, Skipback, Pennsylvania.
Now, I draw your attention to document A15, Fred, and ask you to identify it.
This is a copy of my professional profile or CV.
Is this an accurate representation of your education and professional background?
Yes, it is.
Are you a licensed professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Yes, I am.
Briefly describe your educational and professional background for the board.
I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Lafayette College. I have been a practicing engineer for almost 30 years. I need 3 more months.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am the president of Ebert Engineering. We are a water and wastewater consulting firm that serves approximately 24 municipalities, as well as approximately 50 private developers.
Could you explain your duties at Ebert Engineer?
I supervise the engineering department. I'm client contact. for approximately 13 municipalities. As part of a client contact for my municipal work, we're designing pump station, wastewater treatment plant upgrades, doing regulatory reporting, doing Chapter 94 reports, capacity certifications, reviews of land development plans, planning modules, capacity certifications, and regulatory reporting. And then I'm also, for our private side, I design water and wastewater treatment plants, drip irrigation facilities, a number of those. I currently have 3 of them in design, but I still lead the design. I do also supervise approximately 7 other engineers and their designs.
Do me a favor, slow it down just a little bit. You've got a lot of information to convey. As part of your duties, do you regularly design and engineer wastewater treatment facilities and associated disposal facilities?
Yes, I do.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that, what you would do in the course of a normal year?
In the course of a normal year, we will design 3 to 7 wastewater treatment plants, 30 pump stations, 3 to 7 water systems and water booster stations. And in the treatment plants, the reason it's 3 to 7 is there may be one that is in the planning phase, one that's in the design and permitting phase, one that is in the construction phase. So they'll be there for a series of 3 to 5 years as they go through from the concept through the final operation and startup. So I'm involved in it when it's a concept. What's the way this project is right now, where we're developing the concept, then we're going through the sewage facilities planning, to the actual detailed design, to the permit, review of shop drawings, and then the actual construction assistance, startup, and in many cases, the long-term reporting requirements for that.
A little bit more specific, have you designed and permitted a municipally owned and operated drip disposal systems, as we're going to talk about here tonight?
Absolutely. I have designed 8 different drip disposal systems that are currently operating. I have also have 3 in design. They all receive treated effluent from a municipally owned and operated wastewater treatment plant.
And how about wastewater treatment plants of the type that we're going to talk about here tonight?
Well, over my career, I've designed over 20 municipally owned and operated wastewater treatment plants. I have designed, permitted, and constructed 8 that utilize sequential batch reactor process that are sized between 120,000 and 800,000, which is our same thing. We currently have, in addition to this treatment plant, 3 additional SBR treatment plants that are currently in the design and permitting process.
So you're going to use that term sequential batch systems and SBRs through the night. Spend a second or two and explain to the board what that is.
The sequential batch reactor is a biological treatment process where basically it allows for a very high level of treatment. It allows for the wastewater to basically to be filled and in a static environment, then treated, aerated for a certain amount of time to convert ammonia to nitrates. Then oxygen is removed, it's just mixed in an anoxic state where the nitrogen is actually given off as a gas. It's then settled, so it is a sequential and a batch. So it goes in as a batch. It does, there's two treatment trains. Each batch will do 5 cycles. So it'll go through a fill, aerate, anoxic, decant, settle. And the advantage of this treatment system and why it's so popular is it's a very controlled environment. It's not impacted by diurnal variations of flows. It's got the same exact treatment time, duration, and volume every cycle, and therefore it can deliver a very high level of treatment quality. And that's really what's required on these mid-sized wastewater treatment plant, municipally owned wastewater treatment plants. You know, it's not a small package plant for a school or a mobile home park, but nor is it a large flow-through thing for a major city, you know, city of Easton or a place like that. That's why this is really the treatment process that is most popular for this type of wastewater. You can also tailor it to, because you control the duration and the volume, so you can handle a higher organic strength waste load than you normally would, and you can control all the majority of the variables. You can control by using a sequential batch reactor. That's why this treatment process was selected to provide the highest quality effluent for this job.
When you say highest quality effluent, if I understand you from our discussions, you're talking about removing the most amount of nitrogen from the effluent as any system can do. Is that correct? Or maybe you ought to just tell us what you mean by the high quality.
By that, I mean, it definitely provides denitrification, means the total nitrogen that will be included in the effluent is less than 10 milligrams per liter. Why is that? Why is 10 milligrams per liter important? That's the drinking water standard. So it removes the nitrogen down to a level that meets the drinking water standard. It also reduces, which is the BOD or biological oxygen demand, down to 10 milligrams per liter, and TSS. So it is a very high level of treatment that is way more than is required for land application. It is more to a stream application discharge standard. But I believe and the reason that it's important is, as we're going to discuss later on, we're going to, through the mechanical biological treatment plant, we're going to do all of the treatment, and we're not going to rely upon the soil to do any of that treatment. So that in most land-based systems, you go through like a septic tank where the soil actually does the majority of the treatment. We're not doing that. We're going to do that biologically in a controlled environment in the treatment plant, and the only thing we're asking the soil to do is to absorb that already clean water. While there will be some additional treatment from it, we're not relying on that for compliance or anything, and it will make the system last significantly longer because you're not doing that biological treatment. There aren't bugs in there that are going to clog and do that. All we're really doing is trying to put as clean as possible, we call it treated effluent on there. So not only biologically treating it, we're actually going to do what's known as tertiary treatment. So we're going to have effluent filtration. We're going to clean it so that ultimately as it goes through a drip emitter, this is a drip emitter, it's got to go through these filters. So we have to clean it enough so that it doesn't clog as it goes through there. So that's the level that we have to get it in before it goes into the soil.
Let me just ask you one more question in this regard. You said drinking water standard. That's the federal drinking water standard, isn't it?
Federal and state, yes.
Okay. I'd offer Mr. Ebert as an expert in civil engineering and wastewater facilities design.
Now, some of you may not realize what party status means, and perhaps this will be cleaned up if Mr. Blasey ultimately represents some of the other members that have, or the individuals that have claimed party status. But I need to check with everyone that there's no objection to Mr. Ebert being. Okay, no objection.
We had no objection.
No objection. Any of the.
Can the question be asked?
No. Any individuals that have been identified as party status have any objection to Mr. Ebert being qualified or being designated as an expert in sewage treatment plant, wastewater?
Civil engineering and wastewater facilities
There you
design.
go. No, okay. To make things faster, if you do have an objection, let's do it that way.
Maybe it would be helpful to tell folks not represented that I think the issue of expertise is different than agreeing with what he's saying.
Correct. This is just to qualify him as an expert in that particular area, not whether or not you agree with him, just that he's an expert in this particular area. Okay, I see no objections, so he's qualified.
Thank you. Mr. Ebert, have you been retained by River Point Logistics LLC?
Yes, I have been.
And what were you asked to do in connection with the proposed development that we're here to talk about tonight?
I was asked to develop both the water and the wastewater collection, conveyance, treatment, and disposal from the concept, developing an initial concept, identifying the best alternative, to take it through the PADEP sewage facilities planning approval process, then to do the design work, which will be reviewed and approved by the municipal authority, prepare the required permit applications, obtain the required permit applications, permit approvals from the PADEP, the Delaware River Basin Commission, and take the project through construction to the startup and operation when it will be dedicated to the authority.
So I just want to make sure that everybody understands the scope of this. So you have to take this development through the sewage facilities planning approval process with DEP.
That is correct.
You have to obtain approval of the collection and conveyance design plans by the municipal authority.
That is correct.
You have to obtain approval of the wastewater treatment facilities design plans and specs by the municipal authority.
That is correct.
You've got to get approval of the drip irrigation design plans and specs by the municipal authority.
That is correct.
You have to get a PADEP water quality management permit for the construction of the conveyance system, a pump station, a treatment plant, and the drip irrigation facility.
That is correct.
All of those and one more. Depending upon the size, you may have to get a certain type of approval from the Delaware River Basin Commission.
I will have to get docket approval because we're greater than 50,000 gallons a day.
Okay. If you would turn to, I think it's number 5 here, exhibit number 5, I want you to identify it. I'm sorry, not 5. No, I'm looking for the planning module, A7. A7 is this rather lengthy document. Could you explain to the board what this document is and how it fits in the approval process?
This is really the first step in the overall approval process for the wastewater conveyance, treatment, and disposal. So what this document does is this document actually amends the Township's Act 537 plan, and it becomes incorporated as part of it. So what this, in order to get sewage facilities planning approval, we will prepare an alternative analysis, compare a selected alternative. Once that's done, and I'll describe then the soils that's witnessed by DEP, that will actually, once it's compiled, it will go to the Township Planning Commission, the County Planning Commission for their review and comment. It will then go out for a 30-day public comment period before it will be adopted by resolution by the Board of Supervisors, submitted to DEP for their review and approval. In this case, we also, what's included in here is the science of the land application or drip irrigation. So we have to include in here all of the soil testing that we did, hydraulic conductivity that is witnessed by DEP, the mounding analysis, which is prepared by a professional hydrogeologist and contained within their detailed hydrogeologic report. That will all be reviewed by the township. by the county planning commission, township planning commission, compiled in, and that's submitted in, and that becomes the basis which identifies it identifies the service area, which is property specific here, and identifies the means and methods for the treatment and disposal of the wastewater on that property. And that becomes a formal township document.
Fred, this exhibit that I just pointed to, I believe, is a revised planning module, is it not?
That is correct.
Did you submit a earlier version of this to the township?
We did. We received comments from the township's consulting engineer. We have addressed those comments. We have refined and completed and updated all the soil testing and included the necessary things to address that. And it will be ready for resubmission back into the township as part of the overall approval process.
Okay. Now, as part of your work for River Point Logistics, were you provided with plans for the proposed development of what is known as River Point Logistics Center?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Let's look at Exhibit A6. Excuse my back, I put this on the board so that people in the audience have a shot at seeing. You all have copies of this in your books, so maybe I can turn it the other way so that people can see it. I'll put it in this, yeah. If I touch this, it's full.
Is this the document identified in the lower right as SK1?
Yes. Correct. It's in your book as 6, I believe, yes.
And just to clarify, Mr. Kaplan, it's a plan prepared by Justin Giannotti?
I was just going to go through that.
Okay, sorry. Yep, go ahead then.
I think I was going to go through that with Fred. So, can you describe briefly for us what this plan depicts?
It depicts the lands that are either owned or under agreement by River Point Logistics. Contains approximately 860 acres. There's approximately 770 acres that are on the River Point Logistics that will be developed into the industrial park. There's approximately almost 90 acres that will be used for the disposal of the treated effluent. The proposed development has received preliminary plan approval, so it was basically consolidated and then re-subdivided into into 10 lots that contain 13 buildings that will be developed into approximately 6.29 million square feet of industrial space in accordance with the zoning.
And this plan also, I believe in the corner, shows the former Engel property. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes. So as part of the overall approval process, we had evaluated the options for land-based disposal. As part of that desktop analysis that I'll look at, that I'll describe in much more detail later, we identified this property known as Potomac West, which was then purchased by River Point Logistics for the disposal. It contains approximately almost 90 acres. It's like 89.6 acres, of which we'll develop into 22.6 acres of drip disposal fields on that property.
Stop right there. Repeat that, please, so
So-
that the audience understands what you just said.
So on the overall Potomac West property, which is approximately 90 acres. We will be installing drip fields on only 22.6 acres of that entire parcel. So approximately less than a third, almost less than a quarter.
And the total was 90 what, you said?
Approximately 90, it's like 98.6.
Eight-
Oh, no, 89.6.
Yeah.
89, just shy of 90, 89.6. And we're developing drip fields on 22.6 acres.
You know, just so we're sure, you were retained by River Point Logistics to obtain the necessary permits for this system and to design the systems necessary to obtain those permits.
That is correct.
Do you want to read it back, please?
And just so we're sure, you were retained by River Point Logistics to obtain necessary permits for the system and to design the systems necessary to obtain those permits?
You got it? Did you hear it? Go off the record. I asked him whether or not he was retained to obtain the permits and to design the plans that he needed to design to obtain those permits. His answer was yes. I hear you. I agree. Let's move on to a little different subject. Am I correct that currently there is no available public sewer service available to the River Point Logistics development?
That is correct. To my knowledge, there's none available in Upper Mount Bethel Township.
So what about Portland Borough?
Portland Borough, which is adjoining this, does have some available capacity. We have reached out to them to see what capacity would be available. Because they're not an authority, they would have to do a bulk purchase, a bulk sale to either Upper Mount Bethel Township or now the Upper Mount Bethel Township Authority. But we are investigating that. We have asked them to determine how much they have available that they will be willing to sell us, and if they would be willing to sell it to us.
And do you have a sense for if they were able to sell us capacity, would that obviate the need for the plant that we're talking about?
No, it definitely would not. They would not come close to being able to meet the needs of this property. And if anything, it would be the ability to have flows go there initially while we were building out, so we would have enough flows to operate the biological treatment system. So our proposed system is a biological system. It needs approximately 10 to 20% of the flows to have enough incoming carbon sources to run the biological treatment system. So we could initially go there, utilize that. If our need increased, we could meet increased or future demands by using that capacity. So it would be another tool in the authority's own system of conveying wastewater to multiple locations.
So if I boil that down, it's unlikely that Portland Borough will be able to accept all of the projected sewage. So what's your...
They absolutely cannot.
Okay, so in a case like that, under all this DEP rules and regulations that you've referred to, what are the options?
Okay, so the first option that you evaluate, and this is what's known as the alternative analysis, which is a key component of the overall sewage facilities planning module. So we have to look at all the options, and there's a hierarchy. So the first thing that you look at is there existing available public municipally owned system? If that's not available, can you create a new treatment plant that will be municipally owned and operated? Is the second most desirable. The third option on there would be to have a public utility commission regulated entity, which would be most likely be a third party, privately owned treatment plant, Aqua Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania American, something like that, that would own it and be regulated under the Public Utility Commission would be the third option. The last option would be to have a association-owned wastewater treatment plant that will be owned by an association, to be the lowest of the four alternatives for a treatment plant for a project of this size.
Okay, so you've talked about the alternatives analysis on an overall system basis, and obviously from this application, you've come to the conclusion that the developers should design, build, and dedicate to the township's municipal authority, the system. Now, what about your choice of disposal of effluent?
Okay.
Is there a similar priority or analysis?
There absolutely is. So, in the DEP hierarchy, as they go down through, the first thing you have to evaluate is a land-based disposal. If land-based disposal is not available, you look at the availability and feasibility to go to a stream discharge with having the lowest classification in order, meaning that if there's a Delaware River and a high-quality stream, you have to go to the Delaware River. However, if you have to go down that in a linear. If land-based disposal is deemed to be feasible, and in this case, it was, you don't get to go down to the next step. That is where you have to go, and you have to design it. So it's not like I can choose where I want. DEP says the only way you can discharge to a stream is if you prove to us that you cannot discharge with a land-based alternative. Here, we were able to document, prove, and went through the entire science to make sure that we could dispose of all of our planned effluent that's currently planned in a land-based disposal with some extra. Therefore, I couldn't even evaluate the option of a stream discharge alternative because the most desirable option was determined to be feasible.
So, okay, let's move down in the linear equation here. So now you've decided that it has to be a municipally based system, and it's got to be land-based discharge. Tell us what the next steps are in planning this project, and tell us what of those steps you and your associates have taken.
All right, we've actually gone pretty far down through. Once you, and I'm going to go back and further describe how we identified that the land-based disposal was there. But what we actually do then is once we decide that we're land-based, we then look at what is our treatment requirements. Based on the quality of effluent that we need to meet our discharge, which is land-based, that will identify a treatment process. Once we identify the treatment process, then we'll identify the treatment manufacturer, then the treatment plant location, and then how we're going to convey the wastewater to that treatment plant location. Well, to go back to the land-based disposal, it is a rather linear process that you gain knowledge and you refine it as it goes down, and you further refine your disposal capacity, because where you start with is you estimate the volume of flow. So the first thing in this feasibility study is you need to start with you start with what service area am I going to service? Then you have to identify how much wastewater is going to be generated within that service area in order to determine if land-based disposal is an option. Because just because you have good soils, if you only have soil disposal for 10,000 gallons and you have 100,000 gallons in need, the land-based disposal isn't feasible, and then you would go to stream discharge. So really where we start is we calculate the flows. How do we do that in this case? Because we don't know the tenants, So you have to start with a known published document and published criteria, as well as experience within the industry. So what we do is we start by calculating a number of employees per building. And then we use the DEP published flow of 35 gallons per day per employee. Now, we know that's very high and conservative because an office employee is only 10 gallons per day. And that's even before we get to today's, water conserving fixtures. So it's a very conservative means to start with calculating the flows. So we calculate the number of employees per building. How do you do that? You really go back and you start with things that you know and can document, the number of parking spaces. You assume that each parking space throughout the course of a 24-hour day is occupied by an employee. It could be 50% of the employees are shift 1, 30% of the employees are shift 2, 20% of the employees are shift 3. We've known this, we've done a lot of warehouse, industrial things where we're calculating these flows. So I use that as one basis. I talk to the client, get an idea of who they think the tenants potentially could be, and get a mix from them. I look at my existing municipal clients, and I actually look at the water records from industrial parks. And I look at that and I break it down on a per employee basis, because it's hard to compare. This is a large, buildings. How do you compare that? But industrial users are pretty much industrial users on a larger scale. So you really look at it and you're playing the law of averages. And it's a living document that we will do this estimate, and this will be the basis of my approvals. But as a tenant, that it's a living document. And as the tenants are identified, based upon their known water demands, we will refine it. And then once they're actually occupied, we will actually use real data to be able to manage and go through this. And if there's a significant change, you have to go back and redo the sewage facilities planning to increase the capacity of the plant. So, long-winded story to say, I calculated the estimated flow. Once I calculate the estimated flow, we then go look at property, at the soils on the development property and adjoining properties, nearby properties.
Fred, before you go there, just tell us, what did you calculate the amount of flow, the estimated of flow based on the number of people and times 35?
We calculated the total number of employees to be approximately 2,904 employees. We multiplied that by a flow of 35 gallons per day per employee, which equals 101,640 gallons per day. That was our initial flow estimate for this project.
And that amount is based on a full build-out and occupancy of River Point Logistics, is it not?
That is correct.
And maybe you've covered it, but you do not currently know any of the specific tenants. And I think you covered that a couple of minutes ago when you used this estimated system of figuring how many employees there will be, multiplying that by 3,500, and that gives you the estimated total need of the development.
That is correct.
And you've said to us that those calculations are conservative. Now, what do you mean by conservative? Do you mean that that's probably more than will actually be needed?
Yes.
Okay. All right, now, we've talked about the quantity of flows. A lot of people here tonight who have an understanding or maybe a misunderstanding of the other component of this being quality. So, talk to us about designing for the quality of effluent and how that's going to work.
All right. So, and let me start out, right away, that there is no industrial waste and wastewater that can be discharged here. It all has to be biologically treatable wastewater. So it's a biological treatment system. So while we will have
I'm going to stop you, so that everybody will understand. You say it's not industrial. We're going to have a lot of industry there, but none of the waste is going to be industrial.
That is correct.
But it's going to be biological. What do you mean by biological?
That a biological treatment plant can fully treat it. A biological treatment plant cannot treat heavy metals, solvents, things like that would impact the biological treatment process. So it has to be done. And we're going to discuss much later on, the key to being able to design this is a municipal industrial pretreatment program that will define, permit, limit, and implementate to ensure that no industrial wastewater is discharged here, that it is only wastewater that can be biologically treated. So it may be a higher strength than what I would consider residential. Why is that? Because what people are doing there, we're not diluting it with showers, we're not diluting it with clothes washing and things like that. So, but when we design that treatment plant, we know that. So we'll design for a slightly higher concentration of biological oxygen demand, total suspended solids, higher concentration of ammonia or phosphorus. We will know that, and we sample this based on other industries. So we'll get the concentration from them, and we design it, and we allocate capacity. A lot of people think that you allocate capacity only on flow. You actually allocate capacity to industrial and non-residential users, both on pounds per day of organic loading, and it could be biological oxygen demand, total suspended solids, or ammonia, as well as gallons per day. So all gallons per day aren't equal. Someone may have a more concentrated, so they may have to buy 3 EDUs because of the concentrated nature of their wastewater. It can all be treated, just takes longer. So a treatment plant treats organically based on pounds per day. There's a hydraulic gallons per day, and there's a pounds per day. It comes down to basically detention time, that I can transfer the oxygen for the biology. Basically, the bugs, which come from our bodies, will actually eat and clean the wastewater, the same as it does in the septic system, same as it does in our stomachs. It's the same biology. We're just creating an optimum environment. If you put more food, higher organic strength, it just takes longer. So if you think of it yourself, a small plate takes this long to eat, a bigger plate takes longer to eat. So that's really what a treatment plant does, is the bigger plate of food that you put in there, it just takes longer, or you have more bugs, more people to eat the same plate of food within that area. So that's really, when we design it, we look at not only the hydraulic, but the organic loading, the combination of those, and we allocate that capacity to every tenant individually, and that's defined through one of the functions of the municipal industrial pretreatment program.
Stop there. I do want to get into that, but I want to try and relate some of this to some of the things that I've heard people are concerned about. So you have said that, and you're going to tell us how you're going to keep everything other than biologically treatable sewage out of it. So the only thing that's going to go to this treatment plant is that which can be treated biologically.
That is correct.
And then it will create an effluent. And you testified before about the capabilities of the SBR, and you testified that it's a higher degree of treatment.
It's that, and it's also a very controlled environment. And that's the key to doing this kind of wastewater, because my flows are gonna vary Monday through Friday. It's probably gonna have a higher flow than there will be on a Saturday and Sunday, depending on the type of industry. There may be, majority of the flow may come in during first shift, or there may be a batch process with.
But let me get to the point, and then you can, but the point is that you have said that you will only allow waste that can be biologically treated. You have said that the SBR euphemistically is a Cadillac of treatment capacity, plants, and it creates an effluent that you talked about before, that you said, I believe, that the nitrogen level is below the safe drinking water standard, phosphorus, all those other components are refined out of it by the SBR. Is that right?
That is correct. We're not relying on the soil to do any treatment. We're doing it all at the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay. And I'm sorry for repeating, but there is a misunderstanding of the quality of the treated effluent that you propose to put in these 20-some acres.
Yep. And anything, any portion of waste stream that is created or generated at the, by an individual tenant that is not biologically treated or treatable has to be removed by manifest. And that we'll discuss later on how that's not only permitted and required and manifest required to be provided to the authority, but that there's actually sampling at various locations to verify the implementation of that.
Okay, I stopped you when you were about to explain the municipal industrial waste limitation program.
Okay, and we can, and so really what this is it is a application and a requirement that the municipal authority will adopt. And it requires every tenant in this industrial park, or anyone that is a non-residential or non-commercial user, to basically complete a form which they're required to provide all of their material, data, safety sheets, MSD sheets. They're required to, any categorical industrial use, regulated use that they have, show schematics of the entire thing. Anything that is not biologically treatable, they have to disclose. They have to disclose the concentration. They have to provide process piping of how anything that comes in contact with an industrial process, how it's piped through their system, that there's no floor drains in their system. They have to certify that they're permitted. Once they're permitted, they'll be issued a permit, which is good for 3 years unless they change their process, which happens very frequently. I represent a number of them, and there's some that we literally are updating our permit every 3 months because a different process or product that they're making changes. So we have to go back in and permit that. The authority then goes in, and what's represented, I say it's Missouri, Trust but Verify, what they represent on their application is then verified in the field. So they will go in and do unannounced visits. They will look at the MSDS sheets. They will look at the process piping to verify it's there. And at the end of the day, all the wastewater that comes before it's discharged into the system will go through a sampling manual. And the authority will, at a random, using a third-party lab, will have them randomly pick sample days and go sample them to verify that they're in compliance with their discharge standards. We will also put in a monitoring facility out there that, depending on the type of industry and what they have the potential to discharge to us, we will have different monitoring equipment out there. I talked to a person in the audience earlier. I used previously the term pH. That's because it's general. We will actually look at it and customize it to the actual industry. And that's the advantage of these permits, is you don't write a regulation that says you can only discharge this. Because when you deal with the industry, everyone is unique. So you have to customize the permit to their exact process and what they're doing and how their various combinations could impact you or not impact you. And my experience is that the industries are because they have so much liability, it's like talking to your doctor. Nobody lies on those things. Because ultimately, we're gonna sample and we're gonna inspect. And if you're caught, we pull your permit. If we pull your permit, I say we, the authority pulls your permit, you can't discharge. Now you have to haul all of your wastewater away, which is extremely expensive. So there is a great incentive for them to do that. They also don't want to be liable for impacting our treatment process. So we actually, and we'll discuss this, the number of safeguards that we have in there, that there is actually no direct gravity discharge.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Okay, so you've explained to us this permitting system, and you're going to get into how that's sort of guaranteed. So what happens with any wastewater produced by these tenants or owners that you can't treat in your SPR?
It has to be removed to a suitable treatment facility and a manifest provided. The municipal industrial pretreatment permit requires anywhere between weekly to monthly providing those manifests by a third party to the authority to verify that they were all removed.
Yeah, you might have hit on this, but I'd like to ask it anyway. What about general industrial waste or runoff from the factory floors? How do you know that's not getting into the system?
They're not allowed under the municipal industrial pretreatment or the design to have any floor drains. Because obviously accidents happen, things spill, things break. So in order to prevent them from entering the public sewer system, we don't allow any floor drains of any type in any building. That's a requirement of connection to the public sewer system.
All right, before we get into all the fail-safes, let's go back to design.
Yep.
Once you have calculated the estimated average daily wastewater flow, what's the next step in the design process? Is that
More
conveyed?
specifically for the disposal fields?
No, I'm talking about for your overall system. The sewer system.
Yeah, I mean, once we have it, you can go one of two ways.
Let me get an exhibit, maybe that one.
Yep.
Everybody look at A8. A8 is conceptual sanitary sewer system for River Point Logistics Center. Is this the next
Yes.
document you want to see? Can you prepare this plan?
I did personally prepare this plan.
Fred, I want to make sure that the board is clear on how this system is going to work. Everybody's got a copy of this drawing in front of them. Would you take us through this system and slow it down so that everybody can follow?
So what this shows is the conveyance from how wastewater that's generated in an individual building flows ultimately to a pump station and ultimately to a treatment plant. And this dovetails very closely with the municipal industrial pretreatment program. So the first thing that it does is there is no direct discharge by gravity from a building into the public sewer system, proposed public sewer system. It will actually flow through a monitoring and sampling facility on each building. And that's where the authority will go in, and the authority will be able to sample and verify the quantity of the quality of the effluent. There will also be monitoring in there that will be set up to the specific type of industry that's in there. So whatever could accidentally get in, they monitor it to prevent things. 'Cause accidents happen. I mean, they do. So what that will do is it then flows from that monitoring into.
Talk to us about the colors on this.
So the the red triangle is the monitoring manhole facility, and that flows directly into a grinder pump station, an individual grinder pump station. Why are we pumping it to a gravity system? The reason is if that grinder pump stops the flow into the public system. So if there is a spill inside the plant, there will be basically a red button on the wall. Think of it the same way as you see the fuel buttons at a gas station, that if something rips off, you go and you hit that. That's exactly what they have. So if somebody on the inside of it realizes, oh my God, a bottle of acid just fell off of something and is going down a drain. Somehow they know something happened, they can immediately hit it. That shuts down that pump. It stops the flow to the public system. You can then have it hauled away to an appropriate treatment system. If it comes out and it monitors one of the alarms in the monitoring manhole, it activates an alarm. That will also automatically shut off the pumps.
So that's number 2.
That's number 2. And that sends an alarm not only back inside the building, but also to the wastewater treatment plant operator so he can monitor things down. If it flows through that, it's then pumped, flows by gravity down to what I'm going to call a regional or the pump station for the entire site, located down between lots 1 and 2. As the wastewater enters that wet well down there, there's also monitoring down there. The type of monitoring will be identified based on the actual tenants and how they complete their municipal industrial pretreatment program. So that will establish the type of monitoring down there. If something goes down and activates an alarm that it didn't catch upstream, that will shut off that pump station so it doesn't convey the wastewater up. Send an alarm to the operator. We will immediately shut off everyone else. All of the individual grinder pumps will be shut off. That waste will be able to identify who caused that waste, where it was generated from the individual sampling, and it will all be hauled away, and that tenant that generated that will be financially responsible for that. The next location is that then will pump it up to the wastewater treatment plant. As it enters the wastewater treatment plant, there's monitoring very similar to what's down at the pump station in the influent equalization.
So let's stop for a second. Everybody look at the bottom of the drawing. Wastewater treatment plant. Does everybody see where it is? That's up at the top of the hill. Okay. Go on.
So it's actually pumped from the pump station up to the wastewater treatment plant. Why is the wastewater treatment plant at the top of the hill? It's closest to disposal fields. That way we're only pumping it once and not pumping it twice. As it enters the influent equalization tank, it will also be monitored there.
Let's get to the next draw. Well,
Yeah, and
it's really on the right side.
It's on the right side, and we'll go through there, but if for some reason, and I'm gonna come back and describe the treatment process real shortly, but if for some reason it goes through and it impacts the biology of the treatment plant. So this is a biological treatment plant. If something's done, how are you gonna know what's gonna kill the biology? It's not gonna work. It's like you, it gets sick. If it gets sick, the operators will immediately know. We have the 2 large tanks that are shown there. First one is a 600,000 gallon storage tank. So all of this would be wasted into a 6,000 gallon storage tank. before it's conveyed to the disposal fields. It goes in there, it will all be hauled away. We will haul away the wastewater until we reach the treatment plant. But it is stored in a 600,000 gallon a day storage, 600,000 gallon storage. Right now, today, that's approximately 6 days of storage. So we can continue to pump it in there until we reestablish our treatment. That will then go to another municipal treatment plant, depending on what happened. It could be DuPont, it could be Easton. You know, it could just be something that upset the biology, but if it can't be biologically, that's why the municipal industrial pre-treatment program is so important. And we can't accept industrial waste, and we can only accept biologically treated, because we have a biological treatment process. If it can't be biologically treated, we can't treat it. Our treatment system won't work. So,
With that, let's go to the next exhibit, which is A9.
Can I just ask a clarification question, Mark? Was the size of the retention 600,000 gallons or 6,000? I thought you were...
600,000 gallons.
600,000.
And there's two tanks.
And there, one is proposed, one is future. So we also showed a future wastewater treatment plant on there. I'm going to describe that right now.
So this is next drawing. It's really a blow up of what was on the right side of the last drawing. So Fred, tell us about this.
So the wastewater will flow in to what's known as the influent equalization tank. What that does is that stores, because it's a batch process, that basically stores, I'll call the peak flows that come in from first shift. So if you assume the majority of your wastewater is generated during first shift, that basically stores it and evenly distributes it. So it fills during first shift, kind of empties and stays equal during second shift, and empties during third shift. So that way the treatment plant, the biological treatment plant, is getting uniformly fed its food over a 24-hour day. It also basically buffers and allows us to handle any peak day flows, or if an industry has a batch process, we can handle it and buffer it there and evenly distribute it there. It also allows us to slow things down over the weekend. If the flows are reduced over the weekend, we can do that. It then goes to the influent equalization. So that handles your, I call it diurnal variations. If you think of it in residential terms, it handles your peak lunch hour and your peak dinner hour and spreads it out. Same thing for industry. It will then go to one of two treatment SBR. This is a 200,000 gallon a day treatment plant. Right now, so an SBR operates on cycles per day as well as operating well. So how does it work? If I design it for 200,000, I only have 100,000 in there. If I have a 24-foot deep tank, I only use the first 20 or 18 feet. And then as my flows increase over time, I'll increase the operating height. I will go from 3 cycles per day to 4 cycles per day to 5 cycles per day. If I have a higher strength organic waste and less hydraulic flow, I may treat for the same amount of time, but it's only 4 cycles per day. Each treatment cycle is just longer to the higher strength. So it goes through either treatment, one's treating, one's reacting, or one's sitting idle, goes into post-equalization. All that does is a batch process that it comes out. It just equals it down. It's then basically pumped into the 600,000 gallon storage tank. From there, it will go through tertiary treatment, which is an effluent filter, prior to being pushed out to the drip field. Why is a tertiary filter? Because it's got to fit through these drip emitters. It's got to be that clean, so it actually goes through like felt.
Fred, stop. We've got to mark that emitter that you have as exhibit, what are we up to, 22?
Yeah.
22 or 23?
Yes.
22. Piece of plastic pipe that you have.
Yep.
Any issue if we take photos of that and
Yeah, good idea.
we're not going to be able to present it? Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens then is it goes then and is pumped out to the drip fields. But going back to the treatment process, The sludge so what's generated from a treatment plant? Treated effluent goes to disposal field, and sludge. Sludge is then removed by a contract hauler as a liquid to another wastewater, municipally DEP permitted wastewater treatment plant for treatment and disposal. There is no sludge that is disposed of anywhere. It is hauled out and a manifest provided back to the authority. And the authority has to report to DEP on its biosolids. So it has to provide verification to DEP that all the sludge was removed and disposed of at a DEP permitted facility. And DEP does like a mass balance check to say, there's no way that you operated 100,000 gallons a day and only generated 10,000 gallons a year of sludge. They know what the ratio is, and they check compliance based upon that. And there's also a licensed operator, and in most of the municipalities that I represent, I also, as a professional engineer, have to sign off on that calculation or verification. And inside the control building, we'll discuss later, but it's really with the blowers, you know, how we're providing treatment equipment. So we're providing air to it, we're providing controls in there. Very important is we have emergency power, we have emergency generator. So if we lose electrical power, everything is still powered 100%. We have operating spares. So if there's two like a blower is required for SBR A, blower for SBR B, we actually have three. So one can be broken down, and then we'll have a spare. It's not a shelf spare, it's an operating spare. You throw a valve, it automatically goes on. That is actually going to then push the wastewater over to the...
I want to stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you've answered this, but let's make sure. Describe the content of the treated effluent.
So the content of the treated effluent will be a total nitrogen of less than 10 milligrams per liter, a carbonaceous biological oxygen demand of less than 10 milligrams per liter.
That's BOD.
That's BOD. CBOD. 5. Total suspended solids of less than 10 milligrams per liter. Phosphorus of less than 2 milligrams per liter, and will probably be less than 1. I did total nitrogen of less than 10, yeah. So they're really the three parameters that we will look at for effluent to land application.
The rest of it's water.
The rest of it's water, perfectly clean water.
I think you alluded to it, but so then is it accurate that your next step in the design process is to address how and where the treated effluent will be disposed of?
That's correct. And that's an iterative process where we start by looking at, on the development property and on the adjoining property, USGS soils maps. We're looking at drainage classifications for the best soils to be able to absorb this, drain it properly, and go down. So our goal there is to find the best soil. So that's why we look off our property. We don't just look at our property. You want the most robust disposal system, and DEP requires you to look at all feasible soils and all feasible properties. You know, you obviously, if you can't obtain it, it's not there. So we start by doing USGS soil mapping. Once we've identified the best soils based on USGS soils mapping.
And Fred, that's readily available on a website, isn't it?
Absolutely, yep. And it's color-coded for you even. So, but it's not an exact science. So then we engage a professional soil scientist. In this case, we engaged VW consultants. They actually assisted us with reviewing the soils mapping, but then we'll obtain permission to go onto the property, and we confirm by doing preliminary soil testing, where they'll actually go out and dig test pits to identify, basically at that point, the drainage classification. Is it deep well drained, moderately deep well drained? You know, how deep is it? Where are limiting zones? Where are things like that? And is the soil mapping from the USGS representative, and they refine it. Once they've done the preliminary testing,
Well, let's stop for a minute. Let's talk about what Joe Valentine does. Goes out there with a backhoe
yes,
and a ladder and digs holes and looks at the profile of the soil in the wall of that pit, right?
that's correct.
And what does he do that for?
He's looking to see where a limiting zone is, and is it a well-drained soil? Is there something that would restrict the drainage? So he actually classifies it in there, and then ultimately, as we'll discuss in a little bit, his classification is actually verified and confirmed with the PADEP. They will actually go out and witness his test pits and agree or disagree with him on that drainage classification and how he classifies the soils, what is or isn't a limiting zone, whether it's deep well drained, moderately well drained, the depths to that.
All right, let me catch up to you. Okay, so you've now had Mr. Valentine go out there and do that test. What else does he do?
Okay, well, and based on that test, he will give us a drainage classification, which gives us an initial estimate of the loading rate and allows us to get an idea, do we have enough disposal capacity or are we close? Based on just drainage classification, and he will do a boundary on that. The next thing that he will do is submit a testing plan for hydraulic connectivity to the DEP.
Explain that.
So he will actually prepare where he wants to do his test pits and his pumping.
What is hydraulic connectivity?
I'm going to leave Joe Valentine because that's really in his expertise.
Well, give us your...
It gives us the ability of the soils to absorb the water. So that's really what you want to do. It's both drainage classification and the ability of the soils to absorb that water. So we actually can use and permit up to 10% of the average of the hydraulic conductivity. So DEP is very conservative. The hydraulic conductivity says you can put so much, inches, per week or inches per acre through it. We're only allowed to use 10% of that. I'm actually, in this case, that was a much higher number than what I used on the drainage classifications. So we were even more conservative.
So let's put that into the English language, or for laymen. So you have an area that Valentine says is deep, well-drained,
Yep.
no limiting zone for 2 or 4 feet, and that means you then look at the DEP rules, and that soil would be able to absorb X number of gallons per
So
day.
if you were looking at it, a deep well drained soils is approximately 6,018 gallons per day per acre. The hydraulic conductivity on this site was probably in excess of 7,000 to 8,000 gallons per acre. So we were conservative and used it based on the soil drainage classification, which was a lower application rate than what the hydraulic conductivity testing said we could utilize it. We also limited it and differentiated it between moderately deep well-drained soils, which had an application rate, I'm going to look at my notes, but I don't know this number exactly, 4,551 gallons per day per acre for moderately deep well-drained. Deep moderately well-drained is 3,168 gallons per day.
Would you go to Exhibit 13 and identify it for us?
If you go to the, this provides the hydraulic conductivity.
You got to identify it first.
Oh.
Look at the first page.
Yeah, wait a minute.
13.
The This is a letter report dated November 4th, 2022, that is addressed to Fred Ebert, entitled Permeability Testing for the Drip Irrigation Fields, River Point, Potomac West Drip Field, prepared by VW Consultants LLC from Quakertown, Pennsylvania.
So what is that? That's the report from Mr. Valentine's investigations?
Yes.
Okay.
And that report identifies the soil drainage classification, has all of the hydraulic conductivity calculations, that, as well as the classification of all the test pits by drainage classification as in there as well, and that became the basis for my the first step in my calculation of the capacity of the disposal fields.
That was going to be my next question. Once you have Mr. Valentine's report, what's the next step in your design process? Now, let me interrupt you. I took 3 of your drawings, Fred. I have marked them as Exhibit 10, 11, and 12. And these are your drawings. I think that you may want to use one or more of these as you go forward. If you will identify those 3 drawings for us.
Yes. In Exhibit 10, it's labeled as Figure 3. It's a groundwater elevation plan, and it is a plan that shows my capacity calculations on the right side. It identifies the drip field in colors. Each color, blue represents deep well-drained soils. Green represents moderately deep well-drained soils, and I will call orange or tannish is moderately well-drained or deep, moderately well-drained soils. Based upon that and the calculation, it actually gives the area of each field. It applies a loading rate based on the drainage classification, which is lower than the allowable loading rate based on the hydraulic conductivity in the VW as identified in the VW consultant's report. And it calculates a capacity of each of the 13 fields that make up the overall field. That combines for a calculated disposal capacity of 123,516 gallons per day. So that's actually how we use a drainage calculation. We define the areas by the test pits. So we define the test pits. We confirm that the drainage classification is limiting and not hydraulic conductivity. We then calculate the disposal capacity on that before we go to the next step, which this plan is actually prepared for the next step.
So tell us, do we want to use the next drawing, 11? You want to tell us what that is and whether that will help us understand this more?
Yes, the next drawing is known as Figure 4, and it's a depth of groundwater mounding and out model map. So this is combined with Figure 3 that we had just discussed. So the next step is, once I calculate the disposal capacity based on the soil drainage classification and the hydraulic conductivity, so the soil side of it, we then have to verify that there will be a minimum of 4 and really 5 feet of vertical separation between the groundwater table, which will be mounted as a result of this, and the drip emitters. So from the drip emitter, which is installed 8 to 10 inches below the surface of the ground, we drill in the drip emitter, put it down there, then as we groundwater table here, as we apply this 100,000 gallons of treated effluent, over time, that groundwater table is going to, what we call mound, or it's going to increase. So what we then do is we then go to a professional professional geologist to perform what's known as a detailed hydrogeologic analysis. I call it a mounding analysis, where they run a computer program, which I'm going to describe generally, described by another expert, Jeff Clark, later on, where we basically do this and say, if we put this much water on here, how much will the groundwater table increase over time to its maximum? Will we still have more than 4 or 5 feet from the drip emitter of clear soil to that groundwater table? And then will that groundwater not blow out the side or cause a spring? Will that naturally fall down, that we're not going to create a spring in the middle where it's actually going to pop out or daylight on our field? So what you see is boxes labeled 1, 2, and 3. They're inputs based upon the application rate of my calculation for those fields contained in that box. It's put into a computer program that when Mr. Clark testifies, he can describe the well and pit program to you. This is basically how we calculate that to make sure that we maintain that 4 feet or greater of vertical separation.
So wait, let me interrupt you there. The 4 feet of separation, is that used to further clean the soil?
While I'm not relying on it, that's the purpose of the regulations, is that there will be at least 4 feet where that treated effluent will go down through and come in contact, receive additional treatment by the soil before it enters the groundwater table.
So that's just an additional layer.
Additional factor of safety. Yep. And the reason that I don't rely on it for that is that I always want it to drain. So I want the soil to do the least amount of work. I want it to basically just be a sponge. I don't want to also have to treat. When you treat, you create biological things, which you can create biological maps, or there's biological activity that's going on there. I want to mimic what Mother Nature does. I want to mimic rainwater hitting that. So I want to have it as clean as possible. And I know that for centuries, that drains well, it's the ice age. That water has drained and gone down through there. And it hasn't clogged anything. So I want to do that. That's why I want my deep well drained soils that allows water to pass relatively easily, goes down in and disseminates throughout there. That's why I want to treat it as much as possible and not rely on the soil to that treatment. Because as soil does treatment, you're going to create things in there that can cause mats. You can have grease get in there. You can have anything, biological material get in there. I don't want that. I just want the soil to just do what Mother Nature intended, let the rainwater go right down through it.
Can I just ask one qualifying question? I'm sorry, Mark, it's me. The 123,516 gross drip field capacity, that's on the 22 acres, not on the entire?
Nope, that's only on 22.6 acres. And if you actually look at the chart that I have there, I've actually calculated the wetted acres that comes up to that 22.6. And the actual, I load, depending on the drainage classification, I load them all at different loading rates. So that, I actually show my calculations there. And then I only need 101,640. So I have right now basically 20% more. I've gone through this enough to know that I can't go in with my exact number because there's a review and approval process by the authority first and then by DEP. So I assume that I'm going to lose 10% during the review and approval process. I normally don't, but you never know. They may not agree with Joe Valentine, even though this has been approved and DEP has witnessed all the testaments. They say, nah, we want to push that field in 5 feet. Or what can happen is, they didn't like a portion of the mounding analysis that Jeff Clark did. And they said, let's lower the application there. I have a built-in additional factor of safety. And ultimately, if one of my industries were to, a tenant were to be more successful over time and needed more disposal capacity, we have to revise the planning and the water quality management. But I know that I have 20,000 additional gallons there for an unknown tenant that may use more than we originally anticipated.
Give me 1 second, Fred. So, go to the last of those three columns.
Well, tell us what that is.
Mr. Kaplan, are there any exhibits that the public can see?
Sure. What? Go ahead. Fred, does this show us anything additional that weren't shown on the?
No, I think this is the best exhibit because it doesn't, it just really shows the drainage classifications, the soils that I didn't use, and the calculations in a much cleaner, where it actually identifies, and there were a lot of good soils here that I didn't utilize, basically because what was limiting on this site was the hydrogeologic report and that mounding, the amount of volume that I could put on without raising that water level to an area that would be questionable. I think we used approximately 6 feet of vertical clearance. So my soil classification said there was a lot more soil that I could use. The hydraulic connectivity says a lot more loading rate that I could put in. But we took the most conservative and used the hydrogeologic report to limit our application on here, just because, you know, this has to last forever. You know, it's not one that you want to push the limits. It's got to be there forever. There's no other option for this.
Yeah, so Fred, let's go to 15. I'm sorry, 14. We made 14.
Okay.
The next step, Clark's report. Tell us what this is.
It's the detailed hydrogeologic report for the River Point Logistics Potomac West Drip Field. It's dated August 7, 2023, last revised February 22nd, 2024. It's prepared by Jeffrey S. Clark, professional geologist. This is a report that summarizes what I call the mounding analysis. It summarizes all the calculations that are in there, all of the testing, and the results of his computer program that identifies calculates the increase in the groundwater table based upon the application of all the treated effluent that we have proposed, 123,516 gallons per day on this field. This documents that it maintains greater than 4 feet of vertical separation.
Give me 1 second.
You indicated I think you would calculate using 6 feet of separation, right? Is that?
I believe that's what it is. I believe that's the limiting area is. The reason there's a variable is it depends on how far below the grade surface this tube is. So the requirement is for this tube, 4 feet is the requirement. If you're at 4 feet, you will be questioned rather closely by DEP. So we try to maintain 6 feet. Sometimes it's 5.8, depending on the depth of it.
All right, let's move on to another subject. We've talked all about the design and all the testing that you and Mr. Clark and Mr. Valentine did, all the analysis. Okay, let's turn then to the operations of the wastewater system. First of all, and I think you've answered this a number of times, will the proposed wastewater system be privately owned?
No, it will be municipally owned by the Upper Mount Bethel Township Municipal Authority.
And who's building it and who's paying for it?
River Point Logistics is building it and paying for it. And then the actual tenants will be paying sewer rental fees. In the interim, when there's only one or two tenants, River Point Logistics will be subsidizing that. So if it costs $300,000 to operate a year, and the income in years 1 and 2 is only $150,000 to $200,000, River Point Logistics is paying that difference until there's a break-even point on it. So they're not only paying for it, the capital construction of it, 100%, donating it for $1 to the authority. They are paying the operational subsidy until there is enough revenue generated by the tenants to operate, I will say, in the black with a positive income.
Let's talk about one more thing. In the operational costs is an item for reserve, is there not?
Yes, so the operational costs are 3 components. So of the 3 components, there is your actual operation and maintenance, which is going to be your operator, electric bill, sludge removal, debt, which is 0 because it's being paid for by River Point Logistics.
Repeat that.
The debt will be 0. So the second component is debt. Normally you have a Penvest loan or a bank loan or a bond. Here that's 0. The last component is what I call capital reserve or depreciation. So if a pump has an estimated life of 12 years, you replace it at 90% of that design life. So you take 1/12 the cost of that pump, or 1/10 the cost of that pump, and you put that into reserve. That way, each year. So if a tank has a 50-year design life, you put 1/50th of it away every year. So that way you never have to take a loan. And that way you're paying for the replacement of things as you build up. So that way it can be replaced automatically. You have the cash in the bank. I want to go back and talk about monitoring wells at some point, so please direct me back there.
Well, that's fine. We can do that right now.
One of the most important things that I did not describe earlier in the overall design of this field, in the disposal field, is we have monitoring wells that are located all around, both upgrading and downgrading it.
We have them right now.
Right now, we have them.
How many are there? Do you know off the top of your
I
head?
don't know off the top of my head.
12. Jeff says 12.
There's 12. So this is how really, how do we protect health, safety, and welfare? Maybe I'm going to get to this later on.
No, that's fine. You're at the right point.
But I wanted you guys to know that. So I'm actually monitoring the background today. So I know, and like the nitrogen levels are high because of the agricultural things. So we actually monitor both what comes into the field from our upgradient monitoring wells and what leaves our field, downgradient, to know before, if there's anything that we put on that field that will impact the groundwater of any of the adjoining property owners, it has to flow through our monitoring well. So we do background sampling now. We have to do it a minimum of 6 months before, but we're already doing it. It's then done a minimum of quarterly and sent to the DEP. At the end of each year, at the end of each 30 days after the anniversary of when your permit was issued, it's not a calendar year, it's for every treatment plant, the consulting engineer for the authority has to submit an annual groundwater monitoring plan, or a report that summarizes the entire year. So it's not just an operator going out and submitting this. And what we're doing with the monitoring plan is we're actually going out with a pump and actually pumping that sample of that monitoring well to waste and sampling it and having it sampled by a third party. So that way, if there's something that is deteriorating or impact the groundwater of the adjoining properties as it leaves our field, before it gets to their property, as it leaves our field, we're monitoring it. And we know, so we'll see trends. If I see the nitrogen level creeping up, it was 4, 5, 6, 8 over time, I'm going to be, as a consulting engineer, and you have a third party engineer representing your authority, is going to say to the operator, whoa, we're doing something wrong. But like, it's trending the wrong way. The water quality should be remaining the same or getting better, and it's getting worse. So you know that. So there's a big regulatory requirement. I talk about all this, but that's one of the most important things. That we'll know the impact that we're going to have on any adjoining property before it leaves our property.
Fred,
And we're
let
gonna
me,
see that
let me,
trend.
let me, oh, I'm sorry, let me
Yep.
stop you there. Now, let me ask you this question that I put down. Fred, tonight you provided general description of the project, from estimated flows to collection systems, conveyance systems, all the way to the disposal system. Everything you just described was submitted with the planning module that you will submit to DEP. Is
That's
that correct?
And the
Okay.
township.
And are you also required to submit to DEP an operations plan? And please go into some detail and explain that, because some of this is like on the surface and things that are going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, in our operations plan, and this is as part of permitting, is basically how we're going to maintain the field. How we're going to establish it so it's a crop. How are we going to remove that crop? So unlike farming where you add fertilizer, and then you take it up, here we're actually going to, the nitrogen will be brought up by the grass. It's grass that you grow on there, specialized grass, but it's a grass. So we basically mow it and remove it with specialized equipment, and that's taken off of there. We also make sure that weeds don't get in there, because we don't want any erosion on there. We want to have a healthy crop. Our goal is to make it look like the most beautiful horse pasture you've ever seen. That's really our goal and what we do when we build these things. So that there's not weeds, there's, you have to have pictures.
We're going to interrupt you with these pictures you gave us today.
Go.
A23. I don't have enough. What do we got left? Yeah, yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'll pass mine back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take a look at it.
This is the last one. What Fred's got is here.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, it's 7 total photographs?
Yes. Fred, while it's getting passed around, tell us what these are.
So what you're actually seeing there are actual pictures of drip irrigation disposal fields that I designed and have been operating for probably 8 to 10 years. And really what I'm trying to show you is, and these are in Upper Euclid Township, Chester County, right off the Route 100, between 401 and Route 113. And what you're looking at is the vegetative management plan. You're looking at, a uniform grass crop that doesn't have weeds in it. This is what the residents are going to see. I basically put in this case, I put a split rail fence around it to buffer it, so nobody's driving into it. And you can see there is the grass at about a level that I would leave it during the winter so it doesn't freeze as a crop. If you turn to the next page, and you'll see these are, $1 million Toll Brothers houses right next to it. That shows it at the level at probably about as high as the grass will get. Flipping over, you'll again see this is another drip field in Upper Euclid Township, with a level, but a uniform grass. That you want a uniform crop that we're properly managing, that there's not weeds growing in it, but that we're also taking it off. Why do we take the crop off? We're getting rid of the nitrogen. Basically, the grass pulls nitrogen out. We want to remove it from our system So we cut it and bale it, rather than just cut it like you would a golf course and it goes right back down in, or they want to keep nitrogen there. We actually want to remove it. So we're just like a farmer. We literally bring in specialty equipment, we cut it, bale it, and remove it, remove our nitrogen. And you can see, the only thing you see above grade here really are these little boxes. That's where our controls are. That's what you see on the entire drip field right there. You'll see how we'll put a fence around it for buffer. We'll talk about landscaping later on. But that's really all you do. You don't want a lot of trees, because you don't want roots growing into here. You just want a nice grass layer. And you want to make sure what I look at when I go out and do my inspections, there's no weeds, that is properly overseeding it when required for grass is dying out, that they're properly cutting it. They're the things that we're doing.
Fred, good point to ask this question. So you've told us all that you're going to do to minimize the nitrogen, minimize the phosphorus, minimize the BOD, and you're going to have all of this extra protection because you're being very conservative. So tell us what's going on that property today.
Yeah, I'll come back to you. I just see it. So what you have right now is you have a crop, row crops are in there. So really what they're doing is they're adding fertilizer, they're adding pesticides, they're using Roundup to kill it, and all of that could potentially wash off. So they're adding nitrogen in there, and they're applying it to the surface, whereas we're designing everything to remove nitrogen. And also during the winter, as far as runoff, you will see this is going to have a crop there, and so it doesn't freeze during the winter. We basically leave it a little bit high for insulation. I'm also putting in 50-degree water, wastewater, even treated effluent, remains at 50 degrees almost all the time. I'm dosing it 5 times a day so it doesn't freeze. Whereas the agricultural thing, you're basically trying to kill everything to maximize the crop. Nothing wrong with agriculture, but you're putting pesticides, you're putting insecticides, you're putting Roundup to kill it, so that way your crop isn't competing with weeds in there. Whereas now I'm doing kind of the exact opposite. I'm just trying to grow grass. That's literally what I'm doing.
So Fred, I know this is going to be hard to believe, but are you telling us that property after development will be safer for the neighbors than the current agricultural use of the property?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. Is because it's also going to be regulated and monitored through the monitoring wells. So they're going to be sampled. Right now, you have no idea what comes on there. Here, we'll know what's flowing onto the property from the upgrading monitoring wells, what's leaving the property, so you know the difference. Are you making it better or worse? You know what's coming on the property. You control what's on your property. You know what the quality is leaving. So there's no question as to whose fault it is. That's why we do that. And the reason that I say that is not only are you removing the fertilizers and pesticides and all those unregulated things, you're going from an unregulated to a regulated environment. And that's what gives me the thing, and it's being monitored quarterly. There's a professional engineer has to do an annual groundwater monitoring report, and it's being operated by an operator who's licensed by the state of Pennsylvania.
So you might have just answered that question. But okay, you're telling me all this theoretical monitoring and all that. What happens in real life? Is the monitoring, all the things you're talking about, does it happen?
It has to. Yes. You have to submit that report on a quarterly basis to DEP, or you get shut down and fined.
Who is you?
The licensed operator. So it would be the municipal authority who has no vested interest, in RPL or anybody that, and they're going to most likely retain either an employee or a third-party contractor, a licensed operator his license is on there. If he gets caught, he goes to jail for falsifying reports, and the authority gets fined. So no one is going to risk their livelihood on that. And as part of the sampling that happens out there, they actually bring a third-party lab in to do the sample. And monitor it, and we'll oversee and make sure that we're cutting at the right time to be able to do that. There is a time when you may have to spray a broadleaf, something in there to kill broadleaves. You know what I mean? That, I can't tell you that you never have to spray, because there is times we absolutely have to do that. Sure. But it's mostly by keeping a thick crop and properly cutting it that you're preventing the weed seed from getting down there and getting it basically choked out, because it's so thick that it doesn't allow invasives, for lack of a better term, to get in and get established in the law.
I think I heard you say a moment ago that the pesticides and herbicides will be taken out of the water before it's distributed in the grain field. Did I hear correctly?
What I said was currently, under farming practices, they use pesticides and herbicides as part of agricultural farming. So by stopping farming, and now you're stopping that application, that was part of the agricultural process.
So Fred, tell us about, I've got a long list you've given to me about the attributes of your operation plan and all these other things, that some of which you talked about, your vegetation selection, how you do. Tell us about what this operation plan is.
Well, what this operation plan is, it's approved by DEP that prevents compaction. It's basically how we make sure that this drip system will last the lifetime and that we're not doing damage to it, that we're maintaining the crop, that we're preventing any compaction by not having the wrong equipment go on there, that we're putting the proper protections around it, that we are performing the monitoring. So it's an entire list that I include in the planning module, then I include my water quality management permit, and then it is summarized, and my compliance with doing all those things is documented in the annual groundwater report. And then every 5 years, there is a more detailed groundwater report that actually has to be signed and sealed by a professional hydrogeologist. So I, as a professional engineer, can prepare the annual groundwater monitoring report, but then every 5 years, DEP says, now, you need to bring a professional hydrogeologist in there to make sure that you're analyzing these correctly.
Mark, if I can, how much longer do you think you have with him?
I'm getting close to the. I'm getting close to the end. I'm pretty close.
Okay.
I'll speed it. I'll speed it. So, in your opinion, will the overall impact of the drip irrigation be less detrimental to the soils than the ongoing agricultural use?
Yes, it will be.
So, Fred, the project is in the Northeast. Winters are cold. You've talked about 50-degree water. Tell us what happens.
Why doesn't it freeze? Basically, it doesn't freeze because you dose it 5 times a day with 50-degree water. That continually warms the soil and allows it to drain, which pulls air in. And then the other thing that we do in the winter, and you'll see some of these pictures, the pictures are obviously in the fall. You can see by the color of the leaves on the trees. We're leaving that grass get 8 to 12 inches high. The purpose of that, leaving it that high, is it's insulation for the drip tubing. So as we get to fall and the grass kind of stops growing, I don't want it cut down to 3 to 4 inches. I want it higher. You can see on the perimeter, so everything is basically mowed down to normal, I call lawn height.
Fred, we're going to speed it up.
Yep, gotcha.
I think you touched on this, but touch on it again. What happens if the system needs to be shut down for maintenance? What happens to the industrial park? Or, there's one thing, go ahead. What happens?
Okay, so basically we have 3 days of storage so we can haul it away if there's a major mechanical thing. The other reason is that I break, and you see in this, not only do I have 13 fields, but I probably have 40 zones within those fields. So if something goes down mechanically or a field needs to be arrested, I'm losing 2% of my overall disposal system. Worst case scenario, I take a whole field down, I'm losing 1/13 of my overall disposal field. And I have the ability, right now I have 6 days of holding time, because I have a 600,000 gallon storage tank and 100,000 gallons of post-close.
In your opinion, will the proposed drip irrigation disposal system on the subject property detrimentally impact the appropriate use or enjoyment of surrounding properties?
No, I do not believe that it will. I believe it would be aesthetically pleasing. It will look like a horse pasture.
Fred, let me digress for a minute. In the pictures, how many different drip fields are here? One of them's got a split rail fence, one of them's got a pretty stone pillar and a metal fence. Is this a collection of more than one drip?
There is only one picture that is...
That the one with the metal fence and the...
Yeah, this is the only one that's the same. All these are all other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All other 6 pictures are totally separate drip fields in separate locations.
Oh, really?
Yeah. These are not, I think they're all really close to each other.
Is this all in Euclid?
Yep, this is all in Upper Euclid Township. Yep, they are... They're all different drip fields.
Yeah,
Do you have any pictures with 10 inches of snow on them?
Yeah,
Fred,
10 inches of snow.
Do you have a picture with 10 inches of snow on them?
Fred, I'm not going to deal.
We're not going to deal with public comment now.
That gentleman's represented by counsel. Yeah, I think so. Fred, you heard me say in my opening that I thought maybe there are 2 specific requirements in the ordinance. One of them is adequate landscaping. Now, I'd ask you to comment on that. Would you recommend that this field be landscaped to separate it from its neighbors?
I would put a split rail fence around it. You don't want any heavy landscaping because you don't want roots to go in, that would go in through here. But you could put a perimeter of trees that would be, as long as the outside of the drip area of the field and the edge into there, you could go in there. But really, the goal here is basically put a split rail fence around it and make it look like a horse pasture. That's the best way. That way everybody ignores it. People drive by it every day and don't even know it's a drip disposal field.
Talk about parking. That's a requirement.
Yeah, we actually provided 6 parking spaces at the wastewater treatment plant, which is adjacent to the drip field, across the road from it. There's normally only 2 operators are ever at a site at any given time. Why do we have 6 parking spaces? Well, you have DEP inspections, and there's times of major maintenance. You could have a major electrical shortage, something like that, where you need to have 2 or 3 people there. So that's why we provide 6 street parking. Right next to that is the water storage tank, which has 3 additional off-street parking locations.
So our traffic's not going to cause any congestion, is it?
No, there'll be no reason to park on the street.
Final question. Is there anything we've missed that you'd like to impart to the board?
No, I think the biggest thing is that this is a highly regulated, that it goes through the science done, the planning module, it's permanent. The most important thing today is the fact that there's ongoing monitoring and reporting of that groundwater, both entering and leaving that drip field. That's how you protect the public health, safety, and welfare, is you're actually monitoring it and you're quantifying it. And we're doing that. And it's required by having a municipal authority. You have a third person there with an unvested interest It's not a, for-profit organization. You have someone much like you as a board that are volunteers on that board, that are making sure that it's done properly, that they're looking out for their residents, and then forgetting that, DEP's looking at it. And there's no hiding what's in that effort. And the proof's in the pudding in the monitoring laws.
I have no further questions, Chad.
Okay, we're gonna stop there for tonight. When we come back, we'll start with cross-examination of Mr. Ebert, and you guys can decide how you want it to go. And then we'll keep moving forward with any additional witnesses that you have after that. Oh, we'll actually clarify any other questions from the board.
Tell me about time. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I just have one question. Earlier in your presentation, you had stated, and you made a statement about this plan kind of amends the Act 537 plan. Can you clarify that?
Yes. When the planning module is adopted by resolution, it actually becomes part of the Upper Mount Bethel Township Act 537 plan. So this modifies it, and this now defines on this property how wastewater will be treated and disposed of. So it will actually become part of the township's plan.
I am glad you asked that question because there's some misinformation going around. In your planning module, you have recited that the township's current 537 plan is what?
It calls for a municipal authority out here, but the draft, which wasn't adopted.
Forget about the draft.
The 1990 calls for this area to be serviced with a 220,000 gallon a day treatment plant that one of the three options would be owned by a municipal authority and utilize land application. And it is consistent with that.
You said 1990?
Yep. And there was a draft plan and a submission, and tell us about it if you can.
It also identified this as a LERTA area. It had identified three options for a 220,000 gallon a day treatment plant that was not approved by DEP. But it had the same exact recommendation for this property, that it be a municipally owned and operated wastewater treatment plant with land application.
Thank you for reminding me.
I believe Mr. Blaze just has one question.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh.
I probably will have a lot later, but can I ask one thing now? Sure. Make the discussion later better. Did you look at any other sites on your property, particularly the I-2 property you have, for the location of the drip irrigation field?
Yes, we looked at soils on our property as well as many other adjoining properties.
And do you have reasons you didn't choose them?
The best drainage classification soils was on this property.
Do you have
There was-
documentation that you might make available through your council?
You can clearly look at all of our reports and on that, and there is no question that if you look at the soils here, in any expert opinion, they are some of the best in the entire area. And that's why we chose this.
We'll have more later. Thank you.
Fred, can I ask you a question? Fred?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Tony Rayler, just from what that gentleman said. Looking on the map, why does it have to go right there? Why couldn't it go by building 5A or another site on the plot?
Because you have to look at a number of things.
Okay.
Number one is the drainage classification on there. Number two is any impacts that you would have in buffer zones you have to have from a regulated wetlands. The problem with the site, well, we have a lot of topography, is there's a lot of wetlands on our site as it goes down through. And if you have a very steep area, what is happening is when you apply wastewater here, it squirts out the side.
Okay.
So it doesn't kind of follow down, that's what it squirts out the side.
I understand that, and I know we've got lift stations all over the place here. Why couldn't we move the plant and lift the water to the field itself, so people don't have to be forced to live next to a sewage treatment facility?
The treatment.
No, I'm not having, at the moment, I'm not having a problem with this beautiful historic field, okay? I'm wondering why we can't What happens on a Friday night when one of those big pumps spins a bearing and these people got to hear a screaming pump for days? What happens when something like that? Why can't we put the plan out there so that these people don't have to deal with mechanical?
It's a great question, but it's not the right forum for it. No, it's not the right forum, but answer the question. Yeah.
No, I just want to know why the location here is, let me restate.
Well, I think your question was clear.
Why is it optimal to put the mechanics, the mechanics of it there?
The mechanics of it, because you want to be close to the disposal field, so that you can pump. I have to be less than 100 psi for my pumps to get down through there. This is also it's right there. I'm only pumping once up to the top of it, and it's an isolated area where I actually have a 200, and we actually have a 500-foot setback. So if you're off there, and any smells and odors actually are going to get sucked down, down into the bone. So they fall in the evening. That will go down. So it's counterintuitive, but that's where you do it. We also put everything in there in that all of our mechanical things are either underwater or inside the building. So, and any odors are going to get sucked down on our property, down into the wetlands that kind of follows down in that valley. So you actually kind of put them on top because it's mechanical. It's biological. Could there be odors 5 days here? Absolutely. You're going to get sick. Things break. It impacts our property, no one else's.
I understand. We'll discuss more.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. What's the date?
March 26th.
So the next date for this hearing will be March 26th.
Please let me.
Sure.
That's our regular meeting schedule.
Chad,
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm away with my.
You want to go off record?
Yeah, please go off record.
Yeah, hang on. Everyone stay here just so that they hear, because you're not going to get a new notice after this. It's not going to be a published notice. This is the notice. So if you intend on coming to the next meeting, please stay until you hear the date that we're going to have it.
I am away, I think, till the 30th. I'm away from the 23rd to the 30th.
Okay.
Can we do something after that, or?
That's, I'm going to check the next date.
Like April 2nd, Tuesday, following Tuesday?
Yeah, that probably is not going to be.
April 23rd?
April 23rd?
That's the day I leave. Oh, April, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Probably. April. I'm good April 23.
April 23rd? At 7 p.m.
At this location?
This location, yeah. So the next hearing will be April 23rd here at 7 p.m. Okay, and like I said, there's not going to be another notice. There may be something posted on the township website, but it will be April 23rd here, 7 p.m. Okay? Thank you.